Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my home. Thank you for tuning in. I see that we have Eric that has tuned in. Good to see you. Please, those who are tuning in, please invite others to watch this live stream and share the video with your friends and family at home. I would also like to take this opportunity to wish everyone a happy May Day. It's Labor Day, and I know all of us are at home, but I'm sure all of you are keeping productive, right? I actually came across a Facebook post, related to COVID, and it was actually a post that was done by an ICU nurse in New York. She spoke of the catastrophic circumstances in the hospital and the unimaginable grief experienced by everyone that's involved, from the patients who are all alone to the medical staff that are rushing all around to help their colleagues, and to the families who are not able to be in contact with their loved ones who are hospitalized and going through an extremely tough time. I would like to take this opportunity on Labor Day to extend my deepest gratitude and appreciation to all our frontline workers, our essential workers, and to our migrant friends who are battling this pandemic. All the efforts have stepped up to provide support for our migrant workers in the dorms. However, beyond Singapore, we are seeing many marginalized communities who are falling through the cracks. And today, I'd like to welcome our special guest, Khadijah, or Kat for short. And she will share with us how she's devoted her time and her effort in working with marginalized communities in Singapore and abroad, from children to refugees. So without further ado, please, Khadijah, say hello to everyone.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
Nice to see you again, Shah. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you. Ramadan Mubarak.
Same to you, Ramadan
Selamat
Mubarak.
berpuasa. So, how are you doing?
Good.
What's been going on?
I guess it's interesting times, and as much with the circuit breaker and this whole getting used to this sort of normal new, it's also adjusting to what is sort of you find it unusual, but interestingly, in a sense, as much as I'm missing my cheesecakes and my coffee breaks, and realizing how we need to be very much connected, I found other revenues as well. And some of the things in that sense, we like the conversation that having, in the sense that right now we don't even know what day or time, and working from home means you actually work extra hours.
It's blurred lines.
Yeah, blurred lines. You don't know what your day and time. It's, we're talking right now during May Day. But things like, join a group in a sense where I've dedicated, certain hours per week for self-care. And one of which, in a sense, last week I've actually learned to learn sign language.
Great.
Yeah.
How do you come to learn? As in, it was an online session?
It was an online session. Interesting. It was more of, looking at resilience,
Resilience,
and
okay.
somehow resilience. And I think some of the things that we were talking about, resilience doesn't mean being, strong all the time. It could be as well in the sense that you need to take a break, for, time off in order for you to declutter and reach out. There's also that bit about resilience. Yeah.
I think it's important to, although we're working from home and like you said, the lines are blurred, right?
Correct.
I think all of us need to make a conscious effort to have some sort of reprieve, to have some sort of respite. But yeah, maybe could you teach us some sign language that you learned?
I'm just because of the title, and I'm not very good, but the series title I've picked out, and I've asked actually the friend teach me this for this show, so it's welcome to my home.
Nice. So
thank you.
Welcome Welcome
Two.
to my home. All right. Thank you. What's thank you again?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I'm sure our viewers have learned something new today. So welcome to my home. Right. Great. And speaking of your cheesecakes and your coffee cakes, what are you preparing for breakfast today?
Oh, I've decided to take a break. So today's going to be, hubby's going to arrange and sort it out. Going to have rojak.
Rojak. Wow, shock. And have you been cooking though?
Yeah, practically every day, but it's also interesting in a sense because it's just me and my hubby, and so how much can you eat? When
True
you
that.
think about that. But so yeah, we tend to, so the portions and what have you. But it's good that we're also watching while we're eating.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll go straight into some of the work that you do. I know that locally you've been working on a project, the Mapati project, right? Could you share with us what this project entails and what it's all about?
So the Merpati project is under the collective of a good space, and a good space is a co-op in that sense with that gathers a lot of ground out initiative. How we started, it's a six of us that came together and decided to adopt three rental flats in Merpati over an idea that came out over through NMP Anthea Ong's collective
Mhm.
chat group. And we were looking at creating a community care force.
Mhm.
And that community care force was, the idea was,
Sorry, just
you know,
before that,
yeah.
could you explain a little or provide a bit more context to rental flats in the Singapore context for viewers who are watching from overseas?
Okay, so the we have rental flats. We also have transitional shelters, which is looked upon by three different social service agency. But the rental flats are basically one room flat, which is heavily subsidized, and those it's through the Housing Development Board. But there's also another what's that sector in that sense that when we talk about transitional shelters, which you're looking at two households living in a three-room or rather two-bedroom bedder, and they share the living hall together.
So it's like a shared space almost
It is
for
a
the
shared,
transitional homes, right?
correct. Yeah.
Okay,
But the
sorry,
one,
yeah,
yeah, no worries.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
the Merpati Road is basically three rental flats, which was very interesting because it's in a neighborhood which is surrounded by landed property.
hmm
Yeah, and
And so, what are you doing in this project?
so we started, when the scheme application opened for the TRF, the Temporary Relief Fund, the application was open. We thought, we wanted to reach out to the community and assisted them with the application. And I think the sense was that perhaps some of them are not familiar with the digital, and also maybe in that sense they might not be mobile in going to the community centers. And this how we ended up in Merpati was through one of our teammates who were already engaged or familiar with the communities over there. So it was more of us coming and having conversations and telling them, and asking, how did COVID impact them? And that was how we found out how the marketing had doubled. And it was interesting, as much as we were sort of thinking that we were informing them about how to go about to apply for the temporary relief fund. Some of them we ended up also sharing about the social service assistance.
Yep.
Um, so some of them were not also connected or aware of some of the social service agency schemes. So that got us, in the team in that sense to wonder we need
Yep.
to do a bit more because these are people who are already um, in sort of a very unfortunate circumstances, and given the current situation, would they even fall further into the gaps? So that was how we're coming. So right now, so from that we gathered, we got some support, and we are looking at, we were looking at food ration, but as we were just about to start this food porridge distribution, at the same time also as a community engagement found out other needs, the restriction came about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and because we're not a registered entity, because we're just a ground out
a ground-up
initiative
movement, right? Yeah.
movement altogether. So we're working around that. And what's the beauty of it is that under a good space and with the support of other friends as well, they've offered us also alternative to enable us to reach out to the community.
Yep.
So it could be possible that we're looking at revisiting that community again sometime next week.
Okay, great. Yeah, so here we have a picture of you and the team, right? So this is in Mapati itself, correct?
This is a party itself.
Yeah.
And so as much as we're looking at the food distribution, planning out the needs as well, there's a bigger collective called Mind the Gap Fund. And that has other social community agency and other ground out initiative, which
Yep.
came about from a newspaper article that was published about the Sam and the Adams, the narratives of families who might not necessarily be known to social service assistants or might have difficulty assessing it. So we are working as well with other, ground out initiative and community agency in assessing the needs of some of this family and providing
Yeah.
emergency, relief for them for a period of time.
Awesome. Great. And for the viewers watching, we will put in some of these links, such as a good space, in the comments below. This is how you can also contribute to some of the efforts that are happening on the ground in the communities. And I wanted to get your perspective, Kat, on the importance of, I think when you first began to share this project with us, you spoke of how you were essentially having conversations. And in a lot of the work that we do in community as well at Air Amber, it usually just begins with conversation and having fun, right? Can you speak to how important it is to build rapport with members of the community before trying to meet our KPIs and objectives?
Yeah. I think very often we might want to come into a space and say, "Oh, I have a program. Here is it." Realizing that that's not necessarily, what is needed in the community. I think we fail to realize that the community has their own strengths and also their own assets. And it starts first with actually asking, "Hi, how are you today?" and so forth. And we were nobody. Seriously, when we started in Merpati as well, we were nobody. But it was more of like, hi, and because our teammate and he's been hanging around and playing with the cats in that particular district, and he's like, "Yeah, do you know this guy? Like you've seen him around, right?" And that was the conversation. And we picked up. We were just chatting with even some boys who was playing out sepak takraw and so forth. Like, "Oh, you guys hang out here and so forth." So it was really a conversation. And then, get into the bit like, so how's your family, right now coping and so forth, do you know that? And so it's a build up. It's not like, we're here and what have you, but, you start with a hello. And how are you
I
doing?
think, just basic common courtesy, coupled with finding points of relevance or points of interest, I think that's key in building that rapport with any community that you like to work with, right? It's a partnership. It's not so much just simply providing aid, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And
yeah, go ahead.
sorry. And I
No, no
think,
worries.
and because of the conversation that will lead one to another, and it's really interesting how, despite the difficult times we're having, there's a lot of generous outpouring out there, and it's just a matter of whether you give, and some people are just looking for opportunity and reaching out. And it's all about collaboration. So whether you're open to it as well.
Yeah. I understand, as in you had mentioned you were also working with like uh there was some fundraising efforts that you were working with certain FSCs. Could you speak about some of these collaborations?
Okay, so the fundraising I think mentioned was the bigger collective, which is
Yeah.
called Mind the Gap Fund,
Yeah.
um, and I said it came. There's about perhaps eight different agencies there, both FSCs as well as ground up movement. Like you could see some of our friends there, AB Sheikh deals with a lot of community engagement in Kampong Baru. There's Zhengro who's look into the resettlement of people in Dakota Estate. There's also, another friend, Michelle, who does readable, and it's about
Yep.
engaging children. Um, in that collective itself as well, what we did was the past few weeks, in sort of again because as sort of a ground out initiative, we are able to be the first responder. Uh, and so what we did was that we actually started calling all the FSCs in Singapore,
Yeah.
and and we took turns and we just basically again asked, what would be your present need, and somehow or other it was organically in that sense that we were eventually linked up to a good engineering, and the issue that was the common theme was about the home-based learning.
Yeah.
So as if 2 days ago, because of the connection, we were able to deliver to about 218 laptops
Oh,
to the
great.
various FSCs. And
Yeah.
this was basically um, to just us starting up, just calling and just
Yeah.
checking with the FSC because we know they're overloaded and stretched as well.
Yep.
So that was just a simple
Awesome. Awesome.
thing that we did. Yeah.
And so, I mean, with home-based learning and speaking of kids, I'm interested to find out how did you actually end up in the social space? I know that you began your work with children, right? In the region, especially for children who are institutionalized. So could you share a bit more about how you came into that space and how you began your work there?
I think it was accidental, to be honest. I started, I'm not social work trained, but I always wanted to work with you. And that came about with the opportunity to work as a probation officer with youth at risk in MSF.
Yeah.
And since then, I got posted to do child protection service. So that had very much, the experience had sort of built up that knowledge
Yeah.
and experience in Singapore context. But since then, in that sense, I moved on to also set up three other independent social registered entities.
Yeah.
And we were looking at, we were that back then providing independent, very niche children's services, and also looking at children in institutional care.
And what
And
what
that
was what was the goal there? Especially
um,
children in institutional care. I think in the last episode we spoke to Dr. Eric and how he lived in an institution from the age of 11 to 19. Like, what was your goal in that space?
in 2010, the UN guidelines came about and was pushing, and I think right now there's a global movement pushing towards family-based care. We realized the negative impact of institutional care for children. So the whole work was involved for research in 10 countries. And that was basically, sharing the narratives of some of the good work that's already done up, and some of the creative ideas
Mhm.
that, some of the countries that started.
Yeah.
And we were looking at foster care, we were looking at, family preservation and adoption. Just for example, in Thailand, how they introduced it was interesting how they introduced foster care, family-based care in moving children out of institution was that they actually brought children to a village, and they brought in the children from institution care, and they sort of this idea of a weekend sort of homestay with some of the
Yeah.
villagers. Um, and it was just over the weekend. So they did that for a couple of
Yeah.
months. And interestingly, by then, in that sense, naturally, it's just human nature. You will feel connected to the children. But by the end of it, then the agency say, no, we got to send the children back
Yeah.
into the institution. And the
Yeah.
village says, no, 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 we're more than happy to sort of, care for them temporarily. So there's that, I think there's that also that need in hearing some of the stories,
Mm-hmm.
and how we could build up the community as well,
Yeah.
to be part of that, bigger ecosystem of caring for children, instead of, just placing them in institutional care.
Yeah. And so you were basically collecting or compiling all these different narratives and stories of the children, right? Like, what was the most memorable one for you?
Many.
Or
uh,
what's yeah?
one
Which ones do you remember?
um I'm sorry, I think sorry, excuse me, I think one of the memorable one was a visit to the one of the islands in Philippines, Zamboanga. I know what on that was the first time for me to realize there was such and um,
Zamboanga.
Zamboanga sounds very authentic,
Sounds
exotic.
African, actually.
South African, yeah. But it was over in South Philippines. And I think when I was heading out there, the local contact, and again, I've always worked with local contact, to sort of bring me into the space, respecting, the kind of nuances that you have to work through when you come to a new place. They were very anxious, but they were also, was constantly checking, let us pick you up from the airport, we'll take you to, and I was like, wait, no, but, I've traveled around. So then you realize that actually when I've arrived there, it was a place full, at the airport, you had the military with like big rifles and what have you. Um, and and as we were traveling out of the airport to see one of the children's home, um, you could literally see bullets written in the buildings, right? And I'm
Hmm.
like, where on earth am I, right? To realize that a few years ago, this was the very
Yeah.
center that Abu Tayyaf was actually battleground for it. And so when I met some of the children, I three sisters and two other siblings who were in a foster care
Yeah.
there, and you could see how despite the situation and the plight where they're going through, right, both foster mothers, right, um, was able to come out and present me with sort of a folder that had pictures of these girls. They had medals of these girls, and basically like a um, life story booklet in that sense, which, interesting to me coming from the UK, which, was linked to the UK company back then. Um, the life story narrative in that sense was, was sort of like a tool or a package. But whereas there, in that sense, it was a very foster mom in that sense who were able to come up with such innovative ideas
Yeah.
themselves, despite the folders being dated and what have you. And in fact, one of the foster mom was actually living in an IDP camp, which is an internally displaced camp.
Yeah.
But somehow or other, they were able to collect those very memories of these children, and that was a big deal for me. Yeah, to
Yeah.
be able, and was grateful that they were sharing it with me. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. It's like a scrapbook of
Yeah.
stories. Yeah. I mean, they were essentially sort of like kind of doing what you were doing and trying to compile these narratives. So, just taking a pause here, we do have a comment from Hanim, and she says that Malaysian NGOs need to collaborate with you in relation to the provision of more human emergency and transit accommodations. I think maybe we'll take this as a segue into the work that you're actually doing with refugees, right? So your work has kind of evolved from that of institutionalized children. Now you're moving into the refugee space as well. As suggested in your title there, you're now the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Development. But so this is somewhat a recent thing, right, for you with Reyna Movement. When did you officially join Reyna?
So we Reyna has been in the space of refugee work since 2016, and the center was in KL. It was only the end of last year that
Hmm?
the founders decided restructuring and the setting up of a women's center in Johor,
Yep.
Baru. So
So yeah, I
since
took that trip to Johor with you
yes,
to visit the center just as it was at the tail end of being set up, right?
correct. Yeah.
And yeah, so this shelter, it actually caters and looks or well, the main group that the shelter caters to is the Rohingya women, right?
I wouldn't call it a shelter. It's more of a
Sorry, yeah.
women's center. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And as much as we were looking at the Rohingya women, because that's the majority.
Sorry, Kat.
Yeah.
Just before we move on, your video seems to have frozen. Would you
Okay.
be able to just turn off the video and turn it on again? See if it
Okay.
comes live.
Okay. Is
All
it
right.
better now? Okay.
Great. You're back online and live. Okay, sorry, you were sharing with us about the center, the Reyna Center.
Yeah. So the Reyna Center. So there there is about 14,000 Rohingya refugees in Johor itself. It's one of the four states with the highest population. So, as much as we're looking at the needs of the Rohingya woman, we're also looking at the needs of the marginalized urban poor, as well as single mothers. And again, in that sense, it's looking at some of the rental flats, which is inexistent in around the Johor state area. Um, so that involvement, as I said, we were just about to kick off our community engagement earlier this year, and we were meeting up with the ladies because part of the idea of the Women's Center was also to run entrepreneurship program as well upskilling program for some of these ladies to eventually, in that sense, to make them be able to have sustainable livelihoods.
Yeah.
So as part of as we were working, and that was the core spirit of how the center was set up. But then
Yeah.
COVID-19 strike, and
Yes.
then we're like, got to do something. We're in a space.
The
Yeah.
spanner that
So
works for everyone.
correct. Um, and so I'm grateful to the very fact that the team has, then agreed to look at the aid. And because we're already in the space, and I think it was only
Yep.
right, naturally, we would reach out to the community. So we work with one of the community leaders in Kota Tinggi, and Kota 10 districts in Johor. Kota
Yep.
Tinggi is one of them, and it has the highest population of Rohingya community. But we're also very grateful that we end up, in a sense, finding a local partner. He's anonymously named as Sam, if he's watching this.
Shout out to Sam. Shout out to you. Great work.
And he's been in the space working with the homeless community.
Yep.
And also with very much, the invisibles in the space of Johor, in living in the Johor city area. So you wonder, in that sense, how is it possible for us to be remotely here and yet be able to organize such?
I think this is definitely where partnerships play a tremendous role in the successful implementation of such a project, right?
Correct. And it was just amazing in a sense to be with him. And this was basically a reference to from another friend in KL altogether. And that was how we connected. And through that, we were able to connect with other community ground out initiatives. So as much as we're working in partnership with UNHCR
Yep.
and with two other NGOs who are, working on the aid distribution in the different areas, we're also receiving calls. Sometimes in that sense from Malacca, all of a sudden in that sense, a Rohingya community leader could like, hey, by the way, we've not received, any help. And
Yeah.
what we do is that in the group itself, we said, is there any funding? Is it possible for someone to reach out? And Malaysia is an interesting space because as much as you have coordinated efforts by NGOs, there's also the group, and they do it through WhatsApp,
Yeah.
and they are known as Caremongering Malaysia. And basically, anyone sign into it, and you write your name, what you need, and then there is actually a group of administrators that will pick it up, right? And then there's a form, and they will link you up with the sort of different the volunteers that is available around the area. Locally, we do have such initiative, which is the SG Assistant. Um,
Yep.
and also a Good Hood, which are basically digital platforms that you could sign up to and know what are the current needs in your own neighborhood.
Yeah. I think this is where like the power of community and technology intersect. I think it's critical, highly important now.
Yeah.
We are lucky that, I mean, even at this point with communities and individuals that are marginalized, um, many, of course not all, but many still have access to some sort of digital device and to the internet. Um, I think more of such efforts need to be um, carried out globally, right? I think
Yeah.
I just heard on the radio that Yemen had just experienced the first two COVID deaths, and they are in critical or crisis mode. I don't know whether it's deaths or the first few cases, but basically they're preparing for a huge humanitarian crisis, right? Um, yeah, but I think even then, in providing aid, there are challenges, as we spoke a bit about earlier. And I know that in 2015, you had gone to Aceh to provide Aceh in Indonesia to provide aid to Rohingya refugees, right? But you sort of hit a wall, not really a wall, but there were certain challenges that you faced. Could you share with us some of that experience that you had?
Yeah. So back in 2015, it was just an idea that came about because I was heading back to Aceh to visit my foster family. Aceh is actually my second home. I was there with doing recovery efforts with UNDP back in 2006 to 2009. So that is where also some or other ended up in the space of emergency relief and recovery works. Um, and I thought, okay, I'm heading back there, but what else in a sense, right? So it just started over a simple text message, just like, does anyone want to, what's that, contribute? Because I think that was a time also I was linked up with another friend who had been to two other refugee camps in Aceh, and it was by the time I visited, it was actually the third refugee camp that was set up for this Rohingya, and these were the first
Mm-hmm.
few Rohingya that actually sailed in through Aceh.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, maybe let's make that visit. So as much as that idea came about for aid distribution, which is rice distribution we got, and somehow or other I ended up with like 2 tons of rice that I
Wow.
had to distribute.
Yeah.
And it was just family and friends, right? We didn't have Facebook. I wasn't very much on Facebook. So I was like, wow, okay. Um, we were again linked up to the very friend who has went. So we linked up to this NGO.
Yeah.
And so what happened was that as much as it was very convenient in that sense for me to just pass, here's the money, and just get 2,000 tons of rice and distribute. But I say no, let's make a trip down, and it was about 5 hours right out of Banda Aceh. And so it was just me, my foster mom, you can see the lady in blue,
Yeah.
and the driver. So we went up to Lokso Mawe. That was the third Rohingya refugee camp, and then to realize that actually they were well sort of taken care of, in a
The
sense that
Rohingya refugees
the
were.
Rohingya refugees, they
Yeah.
had meals regularly sent to them. They had very sturdy shelters and what have you. So the facilities was there, and I think I had to make that call, and call back to friends, and make that decision, because what happened was that we also recce the villages that was around the refugee camp, and we realized that they were much more in need than the refugees themselves. So in having to call friends up, and Kelly and I re-divert it to something else, we were able to help 400 households in 4 different villages,
Awesome.
and that and then, so this is the refugee camp you see on the screen. You could see how nicely done up in that sense. They had
Mhm.
I think 1 room to it, and also they were able to cook outside that space.
Yeah.
But we did also give a portion of what the funds that we collected to the refugees. So they also had a separate food pack, but the bulk of it went to the 400 household, and I think we ended up with about more than 150, 160 food packs to the refugee camp itself. But I think
Awesome.
the important thing was to also acknowledge the host family, the host communities
Yeah.
that was holding the space for any marginalized or groups. And that is just, I think, important for the peaceful coexistence between the groups, and to maintain the harmony.
Yeah. That's a beautiful photo that we have,
Yeah, I
mentioned in the
love that.
file. So this lady was one of the Rohingya refugees.
No, she's
She was
actually
a
one of the
local.
villagers. She's one
Yeah.
of the local, and I think she had to travel quite a bit. We wanted to help her, but she said no. And she's quite strong. She was in her early 70s, if not mistaken, and she was like, yeah. But she was, you could see how it just, it made our day just seeing her smile. Definitely, yeah.
For sure. Okay, I'm going to take a pause here. We do have a comment or question from Tizi,
Okay.
and here it goes. So, thank you for your sharing and the work that you do. I have been reading Melinda Gates' book, The Moment of Lift. She constantly asks herself the question, what gives me the right, as an outsider, to support efforts to change the culture of creating impact in communities I'm not part of? She too works on the ground. I suppose this is a common struggle for the people who want to create impact and uplift communities. What are your thoughts on this, and how do you reconcile this?
As I said, the starting point for us, when we go into any space or meet up with any community, it's always that bit about having the first conversation, and understanding the nuances, and some of the cultural norms as well. And again, I think when you come into that space, you need to be flexible. You need to admit that you don't have the answers.
Mm-hmm.
You would also need to not have any expectations. So some days, in that sense, you might come into a space and like, but you know what, they're doing, just fine on their
Yeah, I think
own.
the Aceh example is exactly that, right?
Yeah. Um,
I think
so
it's
that
about being versatile and dynamic on the ground as well.
correct. But it works, I think, for maybe, and I might be mistaken, for small organization rather than a big structured organization in that sense, because you have to go through several layers. But again, I
Yeah.
think that's how you built it into your organizational philosophy altogether.
And so, I mean, for those who are interested in community development, building community, or simply just contributing to individuals that might be less privileged, what advice would you have for them? What are perhaps maybe your top 3 practical pieces of advice that you can give?
Um, Start small. Start with your neighbor. Um, and I think, and be with, and start with a group of fun people, like-minded people.
I think that's, I mean, on
Yeah.
your first 2, that's very much aligned with our approach or ethos at Amber as well.
Yeah.
Number 1, I mean, we always say this, I'm sure you've heard it from either
Yeah.
myself or Suraj, it's always
Yeah.
dream big, start small, right? I mean, we have lofty visions and dreams that we want to achieve, but it's always important that we start small and reach those like objectives or have those accomplishments. And I feel number 1 thing is always building the rapport and building trust in the community, right?
Yeah.
And secondly, yeah, this is another line, maybe you've not heard it as much, but it's always about we need to remember to skip and smile in our work. And hence it's important to work together with people who are fun, that you can get along with, because I mean, in many situations, it will be tough, right? On the ground. As you shared, you've had so many of these different narratives or stories, people that you come across from very difficult situations, very tough situations. Uh, and in fact, like, I mean, we have some friends who are refugees in Lebanon right now, and Lebanon is going through extremely difficult and tough time with COVID, coupled with political and economic unrest. I pray that they will be doing that, they do well in the refugee camps. But yeah, it's important to skip and smile. Okay,
Yeah.
so work with fun people.
Yep.
Uh,
Or people who allow you to scream at times when you need to. That helps as well.
is that your third one?
Yeah, I think yeah, no, with fun people, but also yeah, to allow people, just having allow. I think you just need different people to embrace you and hold you at certain times.
Yeah,
Uh, and when you just need to sort of just vent or to scream and so forth, there's always someone around. That helps. I think that helps for me in
yeah.
that sense because it can be intense. Yeah.
I guess that's has to do a bit I get with trust and team dynamics, but maybe an environment or a space where you can be vulnerable as well,
Yes.
right? If not, it will take a emotional and psychological toll
Yeah.
on yourself. All right, so we have those 3 pieces of advice. I would now like to bring it back to Reyna Movement and one of the campaigns that you're working on called the Friends and Neighbors campaign. Could you perhaps share a bit more about this campaign and how people can contribute to this effort?
Um, so the Friends and Neighbors campaign again came about of the need with the COVID-19, and that was also how the new friendship that we've established with some of the local NGOs in Johor, which includes Makan Kongsi, Friends and Strangers, and these are basically ground out initiative who have supported us in sort of the in the aid distribution, and also as much as I think we started off again, right, looking at let's provide aid to the Rohingya, specifically refugees. We have since moved to actually providing aid to migrant workers, and these are basically construction workers who are just left on site.
Mm-hmm.
And so we again looking at working, and this is the launch good, which is basically the second appeal that we're making to the community, and this would be the help that be extended to the local communities that has basically perhaps been could be stateless, someone who's
Yeah,
stateless, so they might not have any registration, and so none of the government authorities would have them in sort of in the village list and what have you.
yeah. And it might be overlooked, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Some of the illegal migrants who are actually in hiding because they don't want to be deported.
yeah,
But because of the groundwork that we have extensively, and kudos to Sam again, we're working with different initiatives as well to reach out to them. So, and really, why Johor, if you ask me, it's just 45 minutes right from Singapore.
Yeah.
And, it's, how many of us in that sense actually spend our weekends or actually once a month grocery shopping. So it is literally, again, an extension of the idea of the neighbors is just not the very person in your estate, but also in that sense, what is happening across border. I think we're realizing that as well right now, is that it will also affect in that sense how it will be for us, whether it's Malaysia, whether it's Indonesia, whether it's Japan or Italy together.
I think especially in a time like this, it's not just a local effort, but a regional effort that is required as we battle the pandemic.
Correct. And it's also about being able to share the resources, and the space has also allow you to be able to work in creative ways and finding creative solutions. Yeah.
And on that note, we have a comment from Dr. Eric. He says, "Hi, Kat," and she says that you are awesome.
Thanks, Eric. Hoping to see you soon when this is all over.
Yeah, we did invite him once the pandemic blows over to come to Singapore, and we'll treat him to a meal.
Yes. And I'll be more than happy in that sense to come and join you. Yeah. And
Awesome.
I think even with the Johor, like making new connections with Johor and Malacca and people like, and these are just people, first time just over the phone call, right? And like, yeah, I'm coming over to Singapore and we'll have a drink. I'm like, yeah, bet on it.
Awesome. Anyway, for that that campaign, the friends and neighbors, we will leave the link in the comments below. Thank you so much, Kat, for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your stories, your experience, your wisdom as well. I hope to catch you soon once the circuit breaker is over in Singapore. Till then, do tune in to Welcome to My Home next Wednesday. We'll be putting up that post shortly on our social media platforms, and we'll have a very special guest from overseas. So do stay tuned, everyone. Thanks again, Kat, and
thanks, Suraj, as well for having me over.
Have a great breakfast tonight. Just over 2 hours left. Hang in there. And so, before we end off, I'd like to say welcome to my home in sign language. Let's do it together, Kat. 3.
I'm gonna.
Oh, wait. Yeah. Okay, you were frozen for it.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to my home. Thank you. Bye-bye.